serial killers and creative geniuses have the same brain scan, the one difference in 2005. Neuroscientist Jim Fallon was studying brain scans of convicted murderers, looking for the neurological markers of violence. Reduced activity in the orbital cortex, the brain region involved in empathy and impulse control. He'd seen the pattern dozens of times. Then, a scan from an unrelated family study landed on his desk by mistake. Same pattern. Exact same pattern. The brain belonged to one of his own relatives. And it wasn't a killer. We've spent a long time building a framework around the raw material of genius. And in this video, we're going to look at the uncomfortable evidence that the same raw material shows up on a scan in some of the most violent minds in history. The difference isn't visible on the scan at all. And once you know what it is, you'll never look at a brain scan the same way. Fallon's research focused on what's sometimes called the warrior gene, combined with reduced orbital cortex activity. Low activity here means weaker inhibition, more raw impulses and associations reaching conscious awareness, less automatic suppression of urges. It's structurally similar to the reduced filtering capacity we've discussed as the foundation of creative genius throughout this series. Fallon eventually scanned his own family's brains as part of a genealogy project, and found that his own scan showed this exact pattern: low orbital cortex activity. The same marker he'd spent decades associating with violent offenders. He had never committed a violent act in his life. He was a successful, well-adjusted scientist with a normal family life. The marker was there. The outcome wasn't. This is where it gets directly relevant to everything we've covered in this series. When Fallon dug into his own history, he found something he hadn't been looking for. An unusually stable childhood, strong relationships, consistent structure. No early trauma, no chaos, no abuse. Compare this to the biographies of violent offenders with the same brain pattern, and a pattern within the pattern emerges. Nearly all of them had documented histories of severe early life chaos, abuse, or neglect. Fallon's own conclusion, which he's stated publicly many times since, is this: the brain pattern alone doesn't determine the outcome. It appears to function more like a dial that amplifies whatever environment a person is raised in. A low inhibition brain raised in a stable, structured environment can produce a scientist who studies brains for a living. The same brain raised in chaos can produce something catastrophically different. Now map this directly onto the cases we've examined throughout this series. Van Gogh's documented childhood involved significant family tension and an emotionally distant household. Picasso's early life involved frequent relocations and inconsistent stability. Compare this to Beethoven, whose childhood was genuinely harsh in different ways, but who was thrust into rigid, externally imposed structure from an extremely young age. His father's brutal but consistent musical training regimen. The structure was imposed, not chosen. But it was there, early, before any adult discipline was ever consciously built. So here is the uncomfortable, complete picture. The underlying neurological raw material, the low filter, high association, boundary-dissolving brain pattern, appears to be largely the same across creative geniuses and violent offenders. At the level of a brain scan. The scan cannot tell you which one you're looking at. What determines the outcome is a combination of early environmental structure and whether a protective discipline is ever built or maintained in adulthood. This isn't a comfortable conclusion. And it isn't meant to be. It means the difference between a Picasso and someone whose name appears in a true crime documentary may, in terms of raw neurology, be smaller than either category would like to admit. And the actual deciding factors are almost entirely about structure, not about what's inside the brain at all. If structure is really doing this much work more than the brain pattern itself, then the question becomes this. Can structure be introduced later, even after a chaotic start? In the next video, we look at Nikola Tesla, a mind that, by every measure in this series, should have collapsed early, and instead produced, for decades, in near-total isolation, with almost no external support at all. How did he do it with seemingly none of the protective factors we've described? Subscribe so you don't miss it.